I never imagined that an ordinary afternoon, one of those slow, uneventful days that slip quietly through your fingers, would leave a mark on me that I couldn't shake off. It started in my garage, of all places. Not exactly where life-changing moments are supposed to happen. But then again, the most important moments rarely announce themselves. The garage had always been my escape. It wasn't pretty or well-organized. In fact, anyone else might have called it cluttered. But to me, it was a space filled with pieces of my life. Old boxes stacked in corners, tools that had outlived their purpose, and forgotten objects that carried more memories than meaning. That afternoon, I sat on an old, slightly bent camping chair, sorting through a pile I had been avoiding for months. Dust floated lazily in the late afternoon sunlight, turning the air golden. The smell of motor oil mixed with the faint scent of cedar from my father's old toolbox, a scent that always brought him back, if only for a moment. There was something comforting about being surrounded by the past. It didn't demand anything from you. It simply existed, waiting. At 52, I had grown used to quiet days like this. Life had settled into routines, predictable, manageable, safe. I didn't mind it. After everything life had thrown my way, I had come to appreciate calm more than excitement. Calm meant stability. It meant I had made it through the storms. My sister Denise, on the other hand, still seemed to live in the middle of one. Ever since her divorce, she leaned on me more than she probably realized. I didn't resent it. Family is family. You show up, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired. Her son, Evan, had always been part of that responsibility, but also, somehow separate from it. He wasn't difficult, quite the opposite. He was the kind of young man people described as good, polite, respectful, thoughtful in a quiet, almost careful way. He held doors open. He listened more than he spoke. The kind of person you didn't worry about, because he never gave you a reason to. But if I'm being honest, I never really saw him. Not truly. To me, he had always been a timeline. The little boy running barefoot in the backyard, the teenager glued to his phone, the college student who showed up during holidays, taller each time, a little quieter, a little more distant. I thought I knew him, but what I really knew were just the versions of him that passed through my life. That afternoon, I was lost in my thoughts, halfway through a box of old photo albums, when I heard the garage door creak open behind me. The sound pulled me out of my memory like a thread snapping. I didn't turn right away. I assumed it was Denise. She had a habit of dropping by unannounced, usually to borrow something she wouldn't return. But the footsteps that followed were slower, hesitant. I looked over my shoulder. It wasn't Denise. It was Evan. He stepped inside carefully, as if he wasn't sure he should be there. Then he reached back and gently pulled the door closed behind him. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He gave me a small smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Aunt Mara, you got a minute?" There was something in his voice that made me sit up straighter. It wasn't panic. It wasn't urgency. It was weight. I brushed the dust from my hands onto my jeans and gestured toward an old wooden stool nearby. "Of course," I said. "What's up?" He walked further into the garage, glancing around as if the space had suddenly become unfamiliar. Then he sat down, elbows resting on his knees, fingers loosely intertwined. I watched him carefully. Years of raising my own children had taught me how to read the quiet signs, the ones people think they're hiding. And Evan wasn't hiding anything very well. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow breath, his gaze fixed on the concrete floor beneath him. I didn't know who else to talk to. That sentence changed everything. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it shifted something in the air between us. The garage, which had felt warm and still just moments ago, suddenly felt focused, like the world outside had stepped back, giving space to whatever was about to unfold. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. "Well," I said gently, "you're here now." He nodded, but he still didn't look at me. For a moment, I wondered what this could be about. Trouble at school? Problems with friends? Something involving his mother? But when he finally lifted his head, what I saw in his eyes wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something heavier. "I've been feeling lost," he said quietly. The words hung between us, not rushed, not forced, just honest. "Like I'm supposed to know what I'm doing with my life by now," he continued. "But I don't. And everyone keeps telling me I'll figure it out, but It doesn't feel like that. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to respond. I just listened. Because sometimes that's the most important thing you can give someone. They all say the same thing, he went on. That it'll make sense eventually. That I just need to keep going. But no one actually listens when I say I'm scared. Scared. That word hit harder than the rest. Because it wasn't something people his age usually admitted out loud. Especially not someone like Evan. And I don't even know why I came here, he added with a small, uncertain laugh. I guess I thought you might understand. I felt something shift in my chest. A mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite name. Me? I said softly. He nodded. You always seem like you have things figured out. I almost laughed at that. If only he knew. Half my life had been spent pretending I knew what I was doing. Making decisions and hoping they were the right ones. Smiling when I felt uncertain. Moving forward even when I wanted to stand still. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, I leaned a little closer. Evan, I said gently, everyone feels lost in their 20s. I wish someone had told me that when I was your age. He looked at me then. Really looked, as if he was trying to decide whether to believe me. But you always know what to say, he said. I shook my head slightly. No, I replied. I just learned how to keep going, even when I didn't. That seemed to settle something in him. Not completely, but enough. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing just a little. I feel like I can talk to you, he said after a moment. About things I can't even tell Mom. That wasn't something I took lightly. Trust like that doesn't come easily. And once it's given, it becomes a responsibility. I'm glad you came, I told him. And I meant it, because in that moment, sitting in a dusty garage filled with old memories, something new was beginning. Not dramatic, not obvious, but real. He started talking more after that. About school. About the major he had chosen. Not because he loved it, but because it seemed practical. About friends who all seemed so sure of themselves, while he felt like he was pretending to keep up. And then, quietly, almost like he wasn't sure he should say it at all, he admitted, I feel like I'm disappointing everyone. That was the moment everything became clear. Not the details, not the answers, but the truth behind it all. He wasn't lost because he didn't care. He was lost because he cared too much. I reached over and placed my hand lightly on his arm. You're not disappointing anyone, I said softly. You're figuring things out, and that takes time. He didn't respond right away. But I saw it. The way his posture eased, the way his breathing slowed. Like someone who had been holding something, heavy for too long and had finally been given permission to set it down. We sat there for a while after that, not talking, not needing to. The sunlight shifted, stretching long shadows across the floor. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't before. The people we think of as children, they grow. Not all at once, not in ways we always notice, but slowly, quietly, they become something more. And sometimes, all they need is someone willing to sit with them in the middle of their uncertainty. Not to fix it, not to rush it, just to be there. I didn't know it yet, but that conversation, that quiet, honest moment in a cluttered garage, was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. There was no alarm, no sudden noise to pull me from sleep, just a quiet, persistent awareness that something was sitting in my mind, waiting for my attention. For a moment, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to place it. Then I remembered. Evan, the garage, his voice, the way he said he felt lost. It stayed with me in a way I hadn't expected. I got out of bed slowly, wrapping my robe around me as I made my way into the kitchen. The house was still, wrapped in that soft, early morning silence that feels almost sacred. A thin line of sunlight slipped through the blinds, stretching across the table. I made myself a cup of coffee, more out of habit than need, and stood by the counter, holding the mug in both hands. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind, not just what he said, but what he didn't. Because there had been something else. I could feel it, something just beneath the surface, something he hadn't quite been ready to name. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, that unsettled me more than anything he had already shared. The day moved forward the way days always do, quietly, steadily, without asking for permission. I went through my usual routine, tidying up, folding laundry, taking care of the small, ordinary things that fill the hours. But no matter what I was doing, my thoughts kept circling back to him. To the look in his eyes, to the weight behind his words. By noon, I found myself outside in the backyard, sweeping the patio. The air had that early autumn feel, warm, but with a hint of something cooler just beneath it. The breeze carried the scent of dry leaves and distant wood smoke. It was the kind of day that made you pause for a second longer than usual, just to take it in. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I heard footsteps behind me, I turned slowly, half assuming it might be a neighbor passing by. But it wasn't. It was Evan. He stood there just beyond the edge of the patio, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. His expression was calmer than the day before, but not lighter. Still thoughtful, still carrying something. I couldn't help but smile. "Back so soon?" I said, leaning the broom against the wall. He gave a small shrug. "I hope that's okay." "It's always okay," I replied. "You don't need permission to be here." He nodded, though his eyes drifted past me, settling on the old wooden bench beneath the maple tree. "Can we sit for a bit?" he asked. "Of course." We walked over together, the leaves above us rustling softly as the breeze moved through them. When we sat down, the bench creaked under our weight, a familiar, comforting sound. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't rush him. I had learned long ago that people open up in their own time, not when you ask, but when they feel safe enough to do so. And Evan was gathering himself. "I didn't tell you everything yesterday," he said finally. His voice was steady but careful. I turned slightly toward him, giving him my full attention. "That's okay," I said gently. "You don't have to rush." He nodded, staring down at his hands. For a while he said nothing. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt necessary, like something important was taking shape, just out of sight. "I've been carrying this feeling," he said slowly, choosing each word with care. "For a long time, I think." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "It's not just about school," he added, "or my future. It's bigger than that." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. I don't feel like myself." That made me pause, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest in a way most people avoid. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "Like I'm trying to be someone I'm not," he said. "All the time." The words came out quieter now, but heavier. "Like there's this version of me that everyone expects. And I've been trying to fit into it for so long that I don't even know if it's real anymore." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not out of fear, but recognition. Because I had felt that way once. More than once. "You're not alone in that," I said gently. He let out a small breath, though it didn't quite reach relief. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "It's like I've been following a path I didn't choose, and now I'm too far down it to turn around." "You're not too far," I said quietly. He looked at me then, uncertainty clear in his expression. "It feels like I am." I shook my head. "It only feels that way because you've just started noticing it," I explained. "But recognizing it, that's the first step. A lot of people never even get that far." He didn't respond right away, but I could see him thinking, processing. "I was scared to say anything," he continued after a moment. "I didn't want Mom to worry, and I didn't want anyone to think something was wrong with me." "There's nothing wrong with you," I said firmly. He swallowed, his gaze dropping again. "It doesn't feel that simple." "It isn't simple," I admitted. "But that doesn't mean it's wrong." The wind picked up slightly, stirring the leaves at our feet. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, the sound fading quickly into the background. "I think—" He started, then stopped. I waited. "I think I've been pretending for so long," he said finally, "that I don't even know what's real anymore." That hit deeper than he probably realized. Because pretending, really pretending, has a cost. And sooner or later, it always catches up with you. I shifted slightly on the bench, turning toward him just a bit more. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now," I said. "You're allowed to question things. You're allowed to change direction." He let out a slow breath. "But what if I disappoint people?" There it was again, that fear, that quiet, persistent belief that his worth was tied to expectations. "Evan," I said gently, "the people who truly care about you, they don't want a version of you that isn't real." He looked up, uncertainty still there, but softer now. "They want you," I continued, "even if you're still figuring out who that is." He didn't answer, but something in his posture shifted, not dramatically, just enough to notice. For a while we sat in silence again, but this time it felt different, lighter, not because the problem had been solved, but because it had been shared. "I feel like you understand me," he said after a while. I smiled slightly. "I understand what it's like to question yourself," I said. And I understand how hard it is to say those things out loud. He nodded slowly. I didn't think anyone would get it. A lot of people would, I replied. They just don't talk about it. That seemed to settle something in him. Not completely, but enough. I think there's more I want to say, he admitted. You can, I said. He hesitated. Just not today. I nodded. That's okay. We didn't push it further. We didn't need to. Because whatever he was holding on to, it was still forming, still finding its way to the surface. And forcing it out too soon wouldn't help. We sat there a while longer, the quiet wrapping around us like something steady and reassuring. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above, casting soft shifting patterns across the ground. And in that moment I saw him differently, not as the boy I had watched grow up, but as someone standing at the edge of something new, something uncertain, something real. I'm glad you came back, I said as we finally stood up. He gave a small smile. Me too. As he walked away, I stayed there for a moment, watching the space he had just left behind. And I realized something. This wasn't just about him figuring out who he was. It was about trust, about being seen, about having one place, just one, where you didn't have to pretend. I didn't know exactly what he was going to say next, but I knew this much. Whatever it was, it mattered, and somehow I was meant to hear it. For the next few days, life returned to its usual rhythm, but I didn't. Outwardly, everything looked the same. I went about my routines, checked off small tasks, answered calls, made meals. Nothing dramatic changed. And yet, something inside me had shifted in a quiet, undeniable way. Evan's words stayed with me. Not just what he had said, but the space around it. The pauses, the hesitation, the sense that he had only just begun to open a door he had kept closed for years. It made me reflect on things I hadn't thought about in a long time. About how many people move through life carrying silent questions. About how often we accept the roles handed to us without ever asking whether they truly fit. About how easy it is to confuse expectations with identity. I saw a younger version of myself in him, not in the details, but in the feeling. That quiet pressure to be what others needed. That slow drifting away from who you really are. The difference was, he had stopped to notice it, and I hadn't. Not until much later. That realization stayed with me longer than I expected. It was early evening when my phone buzzed. I was sitting on the couch, a light blanket over my legs, the television murmuring in the background. I almost ignored the call at first, assuming it was something routine. But when I saw his name on the screen, I answered immediately. Aunt Mara. His voice was soft, careful. I'm here, I said. Everything okay? There was a brief pause. Can I come over? Something in his tone told me this wasn't a casual visit. Of course, I said without hesitation. I'll be in the kitchen. By the time he arrived, the sky had shifted into that deep blue that comes just after sunset. The house felt quieter than usual, as if it too was waiting. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him with the same quiet care as before. He looked different, not lighter, but more certain, like someone who had made a decision, even if they weren't fully at peace with it yet. Do you want tea? I asked. He nodded. I prepared 2 cups, chamomile and peppermint, and set them on the table. He chose the chamomile, wrapping his hands around the mug as if grounding himself in its warmth. We sat across from each other. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. I didn't rush him. I knew better by now. When he was ready, he would speak. I've been thinking about what I said, he began finally. About not feeling like myself. I nodded slightly. I'm glad you have, I said. That's where things start to become clearer. He stared down at his tea, watching the faint steam rise. There's something I've always struggled with, he said. Something I never told Mom. His voice wavered, just slightly, and I wasn't sure if I should tell you either. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to, I said gently. He shook his head. No, I want to. That mattered. Not just the words, but the choice behind them. All my life, he continued, people have told me who I'm supposed to be, what kind of man I should become, what kind of future I should build. He paused, his fingers tightening slightly around the mug. And I tried. I really did. I listened quietly. But none of it ever felt right, he admitted. Not really. There was no anger in his voice, no resentment, just honesty. And lately, I've realized it's not just about school or expectations. It's about how I see myself. He lifted his gaze, meeting mine for the first time since he had started speaking. Or maybe How I don't. That sentence carried more weight than anything he had said before. Because it wasn't just confusion. It was disconnection. I've been scared, he continued. Scared that if I stopped pretending, I wouldn't recognize what's left. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady. You don't lose yourself by being honest, I said. You find yourself. He blinked, as if trying to hold on to that idea. I didn't think anyone would understand, he admitted. I do, I said quietly. And I meant it, not because I had lived his exact experience, but because I understood the feeling of standing at the edge of your own life, unsure of which parts are truly yours. When I was younger, I added, I spent years trying to be what everyone expected of me. I thought if I did everything right, I'd feel complete. I gave a small, knowing smile. It doesn't work that way. He listened closely. What happened? He asked. I forgot who I was, I said simply. The words settled between us. It took me a long time to come back from that, I continued. Longer than I'd like to admit. He absorbed that quietly. Then after a moment, he nodded. That's what I'm afraid of, he said. That if I keep going like this, I'll wake up one day and realize I've built a life that doesn't feel like mine. His honesty was striking. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply real. You're already ahead of that, I told him. He frowned slightly. How? Because you're asking the question now, I said. Not years from now, not after you've ignored it for too long. He sat back slightly, considering that. I never thought of it like that. Most people don't, I said. Silence settled again, but this time it felt steady. Grounded. There's one more thing, he said after a while. I didn't speak. I just waited. He took a deep breath. I don't think I've ever really allowed myself to imagine the life I want, he said. I've only been trying to live the life I thought I was supposed to have. There it was, the truth he had been carrying. Not a confession of something shocking, not a secret meant to disrupt everything, but something quieter, and in many ways more powerful. The realization that he had never truly chosen for himself. I want something different, he continued. I don't know exactly what yet, but I know I want a life where I can be myself, where I don't feel like I'm pretending all the time. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Not pride, not relief, something deeper, recognition. You're not wrong for wanting that, I said softly. In fact, you're braver than most people your age for even admitting it. He looked up, something like hope flickering in his eyes. Really? Really, I said. I leaned back slightly, letting my words come slowly. Many people spend years, decades, even chasing lives that don't belong to them. They follow paths that look right from the outside, but feel empty on the inside. He listened carefully. You're giving yourself the chance to choose differently, I continued. That matters. He was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. Not the uncertain smile from before. A real one, small but clear. I was scared you'd think I was being unrealistic, he admitted. I shook my head. No, I said. I think you're being honest. And there's a difference. A big one. We sat there for a while after that. The tea had gone cold. The night had fully settled outside, but neither of us seemed to notice. Because something had shifted. Not in a dramatic, life-altering way, but in a steady, meaningful one. Like the quiet turning of a page. I'm glad I told you, he said finally. I'm glad you did too, I replied. He stood after a moment, and I walked him to the door. Before leaving, he paused. Thank you, he said. Not casually, not automatically, but with intention. You don't have to figure everything out at once, I reminded him. He nodded. I know. And this time, it felt like he believed it. After he left, I stood there for a while, the quiet of the house settling around me once again. But it didn't feel the same as before, because something had changed, not just for him, but for me too. I had spent so many years thinking my role in life was behind me, that I had already done the important parts, raising children, supporting family, building a stable life. But I realized something that night. We don't outgrow our purpose. It just changes shape. Sometimes it's not about guiding someone with answers. It's about sitting with them in their questions, being the person who listens, who doesn't judge, who makes space for truth. Evan hadn't come to me for solutions. He had come to be seen. And somehow, in being that person for him, I had rediscovered something in myself too. A quiet reminder that even in the stillness of later years, we can still matter in ways we don't always expect. The world hadn't shifted overnight. Nothing dramatic had changed. But something important had begun. For him, and for me. And sometimes, that's more than enough.